Report designation, XSC-77B Alpha submitted by Dr. Aris Thorne, Chief Science Officer, FTL Freighter Celestial Wanderer Subject. Preliminary assessment of Terran crew member, designation. Jacob Vance. My chitinous plates still hum with a faint vibration of uncertainty. It is a dissonant chord in the otherwise harmonious symphony of logic and procedure that has governed my life cycles. The source of this discord is bipedal, endoskeletal, and perpetually sipping a dark, steaming liquid that smells faintly of scorched soil and ambition. The source is the human. When Captain Valeriana first announced her decision, the bridge felt the collective tremor of disbelief. Hiring a Terran was not just unconventional, it was a gamble bordering on the absurd. The data on their species, while sparse, was not promising. They hailed from a high-gravity, death-world-class planet, a chaotic soup of tectonic violence and biological warfare. They were a young species, barely a few centuries into their spacefaring infancy, and had not yet even unified their own planetary governance. By every metric of the galactic concordance, they were classified as nascent, volatile, and recommended for observation only. To bring one aboard a commercial vessel like the Celestial Wanderer, a ship of trade and delicate diplomacy, seemed a dereliction of the captain's primary function, risk mitigation. Gralnock, our chief engineer, made his displeasure known through a series of low, rumbling growls that vibrated through the deck plates. A glyptodon, Gralnock is a creature of immense patience and unyielding adherence to schematics. He views improvisation as a personal failing. The thought of a creature from a world defined by chaos working on his pristine engine core was, to him, a form of sacrilege. My own reservations were more clinical. As the ship's xenobotanist and science officer, I viewed the human as a fascinating but potentially catastrophic variable. My species, the Xylos, are products of a low-gravity, stable world. Our exoskeletons are marvels of crystalline strength, but they are brittle. We think in patterns of logic that mirror the perfect geometry of our hive cities. We do not understand brute force. We do not understand messy biology. The human, Jacob Vance, was the epitome of both. He arrived at Docking Bay 3 with a single, battered-looking transport case and a duffel bag slung over a shoulder. My first visual analysis was perplexing. He was soft, unarmored. His skin, a pale, pinkish tan, looked alarmingly thin. His primary manipulators, which he called hands, had 5 delicate digits each, with no claws or reinforced tips. His sensory organs were clustered on his forward-facing cranium, 2 binocular eyes, an olfactory sensor, and a wide, fleshy mouth. He was a predator, that much was clear from the eye placement, but he seemed a profoundly fragile one. A single misstep in a pressurized corridor, a glancing blow from a shifting cargo container, would surely pulp him. "Jacob Vance," he said, extending one of his soft manipulators. "Pleased to meet you." Valeriana, a Cathar whose leonine grace and powerful build commanded instant respect, simply inclined her great maned head. "Welcome aboard the Wanderer, Mr. Vance. I am Captain Valeriana. This is my chief science officer, Dr. Aris Thorne. I produced the formal greeting sequence of my people, a series of soft clicks from my mandibles. The universal translator rendered it as a polite, "It is a logical progression to have you aboard." Vance's mouth curved upwards. I have since learned this is called a smile, a baring of the teeth that, in 99% of known species, is a threat display. For humans, it is a sign of affability. This paradoxical behavior should have been my first major clue. "Great to be here, Doc," he replied, his gaze sweeping across the docking bay with a startling intensity. He was not just looking, he was assessing. Angles, potential cover, structural weaknesses. I noted it as an unusual level of environmental paranoia for an engineer's mate. His integration into the crew was disruptive. The first point of contention was his sustenance ritual. Within his first work cycle, a strange, pungent aroma began to permeate the engineering deck. Gralnock, whose olfactory senses are particularly acute, lodged a formal complaint. I was dispatched to investigate. I found Vance in a small galley alcove he had claimed, standing before a device that percolated boiling water through a filter of ground, dark beans. He called the resulting black liquid coffee. "Vance, I began, my translator smoothing my clicks into a neutral tone. Chief Gralnock has registered a complaint regarding a novel atmospheric contaminant. He took a long sip from a ceramic mug that read, "Don't talk to me until I've had this." Ah, the coffee. Yeah, Gralnock's not a fan. Told me it smells like a burnt hydro-scavenger's exhaust port. He's not wrong, exactly. My analysis indicates the active compound is a potent alkaloid neurostimulant, I stated, holding a small scanner. It artificially elevates synaptic response and heart rate. From a biological standpoint, it mimics a primitive fight-or-flight trigger. It is, essentially, liquid stress. Why would you willingly ingest it? He looked into his mug, then back at me. It helps me think, wakes me up, puts the ghosts back in their box for a few hours. He smiled that strange, tooth-bearing smile again. You want to try some, Doc? Puts hair on your chest. I consulted my internal databanks for the meaning of this phrase and found no logical correlation. My thorax is covered in chitin, not hair, and the addition of fibrous filaments would serve no purpose. I declined his offer, but I logged the behavior, the deliberate and ritualistic consumption of a stress-inducing stimulant for the stated purpose of improved cognitive function. It was counterintuitive. It was inefficient. It was deeply human. The first true test of the Vance anomaly occurred 3 weeks into our journey through the Obsidian Deeps, a notoriously temperamental stretch of space where gravimetric shearing can play havoc with delicate systems. The atmospheric recycler on Deck 7, a complex and finicky piece of Zalosian design, began to fluctuate. The air grew thin, laced with the bitter tang of ozone. Alarms, soft and melodic as is our way, chimed through the corridor. Gralnock arrived with his diagnostic kit, a pristine case of precision tools. He lumbered over to the control panel, his movements slow and deliberate, and began interfacing with the diagnostic port. The tertiary plasma conduit is misaligned, he rumbled, his voice a low thrum of methodical certainty. The magnetic containment field is wavering. I will need to power down the unit, recalibrate the emitters, and re-engage the sequence. An 8-hour job at minimum. The crew in that sector began preparing for a long, uncomfortable wait in rebreathers. Then Vance, who had been tightening thermal couplings nearby, wiped his soft hands on a rag and strolled over. "What's the issue, Chief?" he asked, peering at the panel. Gralnock exhaled, a sound like gravel sliding down a chute. "It is a matter of delicate calibration, Mr. Vance, far beyond the scope of your rudimentary toolset." Vance ignored the slight. He leaned in, his unprotected face inches from the humming panel. He placed a hand on the casing, closing his eyes for a moment as if listening to something I could not perceive. "It's not the conduit," he said, his voice certain. "It's the number 3 regulator relay." "It's stuck. Impossible," Gralnock grunted. "The diagnostics show a clear power fluctuation in the conduit." "Diagnostics are wrong because they're measuring the effect, not the cause," Vance countered. He looked at the panel, then at his hand. "The relay is just sticky. Happens with these older models when they get a little cosmic dust in the housing." Then he did it. He made a fist with his soft, fleshy hand and struck the side of the recycler unit with a sharp, resonant thud, thump. The sound was barbaric. Sacrilegious. Gralnock flinched as if he'd been personally struck. I felt my antennae twitch in shock. Violence against a machine was the ultimate sign of incompetence. A single green light on the panel, previously amber, blinked on. The hum of the recycler deepened, stabilized. The air began to sweeten. The alarms fell silent. There was a long, profound silence on Deck 7. Gralnock stared at the panel, then at Vance's hand, then back at the panel. His massive, slow-processing mind was trying to reconcile a perfect diagnostic report with an act of primitive barbarism that had undeniably worked. "That is not in the technical manual," Gralnock finally managed to say, his voice strained. Vance shrugged, rubbing his knuckles. "Some things aren't. Just needed a little percussive maintenance." He grinned at me. "Works on everything from starship recyclers to stubborn snack machines." I logged the incident with a growing sense of cognitive dissonance. The human had bypassed hours of meticulous procedure with an act of calibrated violence. He had not struck the machine randomly. He had identified a specific point and applied a precise amount of kinetic force. He had diagnosed the problem not with scanners, but with some kind of innate, physical intuition. It was as if he and the machine had had a conversation in a language of vibration and impact. This pattern continued. A flickering light panel in the mess hall that our technicians had struggled with for a cycle was fixed when Vance, passing by, simply tightened the bulb with a quick, forceful twist that should have shattered the filament. A stuck cargo door, which Gralnock had scheduled for disassembly, was freed when Vance slammed his shoulder into it at just the right angle. He called it giving it some English, another idiom that defied translation and logic. His apparent indestructibility was another source of constant bewilderment. During a plasma conduit transfer, a burst of superheated coolant sprayed across a section of the engineering bay. Zephyr, our avian pilot, had a few of her wingtips singed and required immediate medical attention. Vance, who was closer to the burst, caught a splatter across his forearm. His reaction was shocking. He produced a string of guttural, monosyllabic curses. A vocalization I later learned was called swearing, and thrust his arm under a stream of emergency coolant. The skin on his arm had blistered into an angry red patch. By my estimation, it was a second-degree thermal injury that should have incapacitated him. The pain alone would have sent a Xylosian into a catatonic state. Vance simply wrapped the arm in a Medigel patch from a standard first aid kit, grimaced, and went back to his work, favoring his other arm slightly. Within a few days, the blistered skin began to peel away, revealing new, pink skin underneath. His body was not just repairing the damage. It was aggressively rebuilding itself at a rate that defied all our known models of biology for sentient species. We Xylos, if our chitin cracks, must secrete a resin and remain still for cycles, hoping the patch holds. The human simply healed. It was as if his very cells were in a constant, furious state of rebellion against entropy. He seemed to treat his own body with the same casual disregard he treated machinery. He was a system to be patched, cursed at, and pushed to its limits. This combination of fragility and resilience was a paradox that I could not resolve. How could something so soft be so durable? How could a creature with no natural armor be so willing to place itself in harm's way? Then came the realization that his influence extended beyond machinery and self-repair. The crew of the Wanderer is a typical mix of galactic species. My logical Xylosians, Gralnock's stoic Glyptodons, Valeriana's proud Cathar, Zephyr's flighty avians. We coexist efficiently, but we are not by nature a cohesive social unit. We perform our duties, we take our nutrient paste, we enter our regenerative cycles. Vance changed that. He introduced the concept of movie night. He jury-rigged a projector in the main cargo bay and began screening selections from Earth's cultural archives. At first, attendance was sparse. I attended out of scientific curiosity. The films were bizarre, tales of heroism, comedy, and tragedy that seemed emotionally overwrought and often physically impossible. Yet the other crew members slowly began to show up. I watched, fascinated, as a Cathar security guard, a being bred for stoicism, let out a deep, rumbling laugh at a comedic film. I saw two Glyptodon cargo handlers, who normally only communicated in grunts, discussing the tactical foolishness of a historical war film. Vance would provide commentary, explaining cultural context, sharing a salty, crunchy snack he called popcorn. He was bonding the crew. He was turning a collection of individuals into a pack. He used stories, shared food, and laughter as his tools. This was not in any command manual. It was not a logical procedure for improving efficiency. And yet, crew morale reports, which I compiled, showed a 17% increase in positive social interactions and a 9% decrease in interspecies disputes. He was hacking our social structure with the same intuitive ease he used on our machines. I began to suspect that I was not looking at an engineer. I was looking at something far older, far more fundamental. My research into Earth's biosphere became an obsession. I spent my off-duty cycles combing the galactic networks for any scrap of information. I found reams of data, mostly ecological surveys and early ethnographic reports, and then I found it. It was a piece of archival footage, grainy and low resolution, from a pre-spaceflight era on Earth. It showed a pack of Terran canids wolves. They were called, hunting a large herbivore. The coordination was breathtaking. They flanked, they harried, they drove their prey into exhaustion. They were not the strongest nor the fastest, but they were relentless. They were a team. Then I cross-referenced this with early human anthropology. I learned of a technique called persistence hunting. Early humans, soft, slow, and clawless, would hunt prey far faster and stronger than themselves simply by not stopping. They would jog relentlessly for hours under a brutal sun until the superior creature collapsed from heat and exhaustion. They didn't win with strength, they won with stamina. They won by being too stubborn to die. I looked at the binocular eyes of the human, designed for depth perception, for focus on a single target. I looked at his strange, inefficient bipedal locomotion, a gait that was clumsy at a sprint but could be maintained for incredible distances. I looked at his hands, not designed for rending flesh but for gripping tools, a rock, a spear, a wrench, and I finally understood. Every baffling, illogical, and infuriating trait I had observed in Jacob Vance fell into place. The coffee was not a simple stimulant. It was a tool to extend the hunt, to keep the predator's mind sharp long after the prey should have escaped. His apparent indestructibility was not a paradox. It was the biological imperative of a creature evolved to endure the rigors of the chase, to survive minor injuries that would cripple others, and to keep going. The percussive maintenance was not random violence. It was the intuitive, physical problem-solving of a tool user, a creature who understood the world by interacting with it directly and forcefully. The social bonding, the movie nights, the jokes, it was pack behavior. He was ensuring the cohesion of his group because a lone predator is vulnerable, but a pack is a force of nature. A cold, clear wave of understanding washed over me. It was a terrifying and exhilarating thought, a paradigm shift that reordered my entire understanding of the galaxy. Most sentient species were, at their core, prey. My own species evolved to be logical and cautious, to build strong hives and avoid conflict. The glyptodons evolved immense defensive carapaces. The avians evolved to flee at the first sign of danger. We were all, in our own ways, creatures who had survived by hiding, running, or defending. Humans had survived by hunting. I requested an immediate and private audience with Captain Valeriana. I found her on the observation deck, her powerful form silhouetted against the swirling nebula of the Crimson Veil. She turned as I entered, her yellow eyes sharp and intelligent. "Doctor Thorne," she said, her voice a low purr. "You seem agitated. Your mandibles are clicking at a non-standard frequency." "Captain," I began, my translator struggling to keep up with my rapid thoughts. "My report on the Terran Jacob Vance requires a fundamental reevaluation. My initial hypothesis was flawed. We have been operating under a grave misapprehension of his basic nature." She tilted her head, her mane rippling. "He has proven to be a competent, if unorthodox, engineer. His influence on crew morale is undeniable. Has there been a negative development?" "No, Captain. The development is clarifying. I have spent the last 300 hours analyzing Terran biology, anthropology, and evolutionary history. My conclusion is inescapable." I paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. "Captain, I do not believe we have hired an engineer's mate from a nascent prey species. I believe we have hired a domesticated apex predator from a world of predators." Valeriana's eyes narrowed slightly. As a Cathar, a species that held a high place on their own world's food chain, she understood the implications more readily than most. She did not dismiss me, she listened. "Explain," she commanded. I laid it all out for her, the persistence hunting, the forward-facing eyes, the pack-bonding social structures disguised as recreation, the stimulant usage to enhance endurance, the shocking physical resilience, the intuitive understanding of leverage and force, the tools of a hunter-killer. "Consider his actions, Captain, through this lens," I urged. "He does not repair a machine by following a schematic as a builder would. He diagnoses and coerces it, as a hunter would track and corner prey. He does not lead through authority, he builds consensus and loyalty, like an alpha establishing a pack. His body is not fragile. It is optimized for recovery from the violent exertions of a hunt. We saw a soft-skinned, easily damaged creature. We should have seen a creature that evolved to heal quickly because getting hurt was a predictable part of its survival strategy." Valeriana was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. The idea settled between us, vast and disquieting. The galaxy was full of intelligent life, but it was overwhelmingly skewed towards prey species who had achieved sapience through caution, community, and intellect. True apex predators who also developed high technology were exceedingly rare. Most simply perfected their hunting prowess and never felt the evolutionary pressure to build cities or starships. Humans were the terrifying exception. They had the relentless, brutal instincts of a predator, combined with the terrifyingly clever mind of an engineer. A predator, Valeriana finally mused, her voice a soft rumble. One that has learned to hunt machines, to hunt problems, to hunt inefficiency. She looked at me, her yellow eyes glowing with a new light. You are saying he is dangerous. Potential for danger is inherent to his biology, yes, I confirmed. Like a domesticated Cathar, the instinct is always there. But my analysis suggests something more. This predatory nature, when contained and directed, it is an asset of unimaginable value. He does not think like us. He does not solve problems like us. When we see an obstacle, we devise a logical, step-by-step plan to circumvent it. Vance, he looks for a throat. The captain could respond. The ship lurched violently. A concussive boom echoed through the hull, and the crimson light of the nebula outside was blotted out by the dark, angular shadow of another vessel. Red alert klaxons, far more jarring than our standard chimes, screamed to life. Valeriana roared into the comm, all trace of philosophical musing gone, replaced by the sharp command of a ship's master. Zephyr's panicked voice squawked from the speakers. Captain, unidentified vessel, it decloaked off our port bow. No hails, no transponder, it's firing. Shields are at 42% and failing. We had been ambushed. My logical mind raced through probabilities. We were a freighter, lightly armed, designed for speed, not combat. Our assailants were likely pirates, and the standard procedure was to surrender the cargo, hoping they spared the crew. It was the prey's response. Capitulate to minimize harm. Then another voice cut through the chaos on the engineering channel. It was Jacob Vance. But it was not the casual, joking Vance of the mess hall. His voice was stripped of all warmth. It was cold, calm, and utterly focused. Gralnock shut down non-essential power to life support on decks 6 through 9. Divert it to the aft shield emitters. Now. That is against every regulation. Gralnock's terrified roar was predictable. We will suffocate. You'll suffocate faster when they blow the hull open, Vance snapped back. The reserve air will last 15 minutes. Do it. Zephyr, get me a trajectory on their last weapons discharge. I need the firing vector. The authority in his voice was absolute. It was not a request. It was the command of a pack leader in the heat of the hunt. To my astonishment, I heard Gralnock grunt an affirmative, and the lights on the observation deck flickered as power was rerouted. The hum of the ship changed, its energy being drawn into a defensive shell. Vector coming through, Jacob, Zephyr chirped, her panic giving way to focus under his direction. Got it, Vance said. Captain, they're aiming for our primary drive. They want to cripple us, not destroy us. They're planning to board. He had assessed their tactics in seconds. While we were reacting to the attack, he was analyzing the attacker's intent. He was thinking like the other predator. Defensive maneuvers, Zephyr, Valeriana commanded, her own voice finding its footing in the human's terrifying calm. Security teams to all primary airlocks. Prepare for boarders. Blast rocked the ship. The lights died completely, then came back up under emergency power. The metallic screech of a boarding torpedo striking the hull echoed from the cargo bay. They are in, a security officer's voice crackled over the comm. Deck 4 Cargo Bay Alpha, they're void skulkers, Captain, heavily armed. A wave of cold dread washed over me. Void skulkers, a reptilian species known for their brutality. They killed for sport as much as for profit. Surrender was not an option. My mind, the logical Zelosian mind, began to shut down. This was an unsurvivable scenario. This was the end of the logical progression. Then came Vance's voice again, this time not over the comm, but from a nearby maintenance duct speaker grill. He was somewhere inside the ship's guts. Captain, I'm in the Jeffries tubes above Cargo Bay Alpha. Gralnock on my mark, I need you to vent the primary fire suppression system into that bay. Not the foam, the raw halon gas. It's dense, it'll hug the floor. It will also render the atmosphere toxic. Gralnock protested, though his voice was weaker now, more questioning than defiant. "They're wearing helmets with integrated rebreathers, Chief. I can see them from here." Vance's voice was a low whisper. "But their optical sensors won't see for crap in a dense gas cloud. It's not for breathing, it's for blinding." He was using the ship systems not as they were designed, but as weapons. He was turning our home into his hunting ground. "Do it, Gralnock," Valeriana ordered, her voice like steel. "Mark," Vance whispered. There was a deep hiss that vibrated through the deck. On the security monitor, the visual from the cargo bay dissolved into a thick, swirling white fog. The red indicators of the Skulker's energy weapons flashed blindly through the mist. "They're confused," Zephyr reported, watching the monitors. "Their formation is breaking." Vance's voice came again, strained now. "Tell security to hold their position at the blast doors. Don't go in. Let them come out." He was creating a kill zone. It was a classic ambush tactic, something straight out of the Terran Wolfpack footage I had seen. Isolate, confuse, funnel. What happened next was not something I saw on a monitor. It happened outside the observation deck's viewport. One of the Skulkers, more daring than the rest, had used magnetic grapples to climb the outer hull, attempting to slice through the viewport to the bridge. A fatal mistake. A maintenance hatch popped open on the hull not 5 meters from the pirate. Jacob Vance emerged, clad in a standard emergency EVA suit. In one hand he held a heavy industrial-grade pipe wrench. In the other, a small, pressurized canister from a repair kit. The Skulker, seeing him, raised its pulse rifle. It was a foolish, clumsy move, and Zero-G Vance was already in motion. He was not drifting. He was pushing off surfaces with a practiced, brutal grace. He was using the ship as his terrain. He launched himself at the pirate. And for a creature with no claws, no fangs, no armor, he was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. He didn't try to fight the Skulker head-on. He twisted in midair, and as he passed the pirate, he slammed the nozzle of the canister against the Skulker's helmet and discharged it. A jet of supercooled liquid nitrogen, meant for flash-freezing damaged circuits, sprayed across the pirate's visor. The transparent plasteel instantly crazed into a white, opaque web of fractures, blinded. The Skulker thrashed wildly, firing its rifle into empty space. Vance, using the recoil of the canister to halt his momentum, anchored himself with a magnetic boot. He swung the pipe wrench. It was not a wild, panicked swing. It was a deliberate, calculated, and horrifically precise arc of violence. The heavy steel tool connected with the pirate's weapon, shattering the firing mechanism and sending it spinning off into the void. Then he swung again, a short, brutal blow against the pirate's helmet where the nitrogen had weakened it. There was a sickening, silent crack. The thrashing stopped. The pirate drifted, limp. Vance didn't even pause to watch. He was already moving, scrambling back towards the airlock, his movements economical and purposeful. He was not a berserker. He was a professional, and his work on the hull was done. Down in the cargo bay, the tide had turned. Blinded by the halon gas and disoriented, the Skulkers stumbled out of the bay, right into the crossfire of Valeriana's waiting security team. The fight was over in minutes. The remaining pirates, hearing of their comrades' fate on the outer hull, scrambled back to their ship and fled. Silence descended upon the celestial wanderer. It was a heavy, ringing silence, punctuated by the faint hiss of the repressurized atmosphere and the ticking of cooling metal. Jacob Vance walked onto the bridge. He had shed his EVA suit, and he was wiping grease and nitrogen frost from his hands with a rag. His face was pale, his breathing a little ragged, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He looked at the tactical display, at the retreating pirate ship, and nodded once. "They won't be back," he said, his voice returning to its normal, casual tone. He looked at me, at the captain, at the stunned bridge crew. "Anyone want a coffee? I think I've earned it," was the first to speak. He lumbered onto the bridge, his massive form filling the doorway. He looked at Vance, his slow gaze taking in the soft-skinned, unassuming creature who had just saved them all. He opened his mouth, and I expected a complaint, a reprimand for the 17 regulations Vance had just shattered. Instead, he rumbled, "Mr. Vance, the next time you require percussive maintenance, you will inform me, so I can bring a bigger hammer." It was the highest praise a Glyptodan could give. My report, the one I am concluding now, became something else entirely. It was no longer a simple assessment. It was a testimony. I documented everything: the percussive maintenance, the coffee, the morale boosting, the rapid healing, the persistence hunting theory, and the terrifying, beautiful efficiency of his actions during the Void Skulker attack. I submitted it not just to Captain Valeriana's log, but to the Galactic Concordance Xenological Committee, flagged as a priority update to the Terran species file. The response was explosive. The story of the Celestial Wanderer and its human engineer spread through the merchant fleets like a plasma fire. At first it was rumor, a spacer's tall tale. The story of the soft creature who fixed a ship by hitting it and fought off pirates with a wrench. But my report, clinical and detailed, gave it credence. Then Captain Valeriana added her own official commendation, citing Vance's unconventional but superlative tactical and engineering solutions under extreme duress. 6 months, everything changed. Jacob Vance received over 200 job offers. They came from freighter captains, from exploration guilds, from corporate security firms, even from a Zalosian science vessel that wanted a creative problem-solving consultant. He was offered staggering sums of money, his own ship, command positions. He turned them all down. He stayed on the Wanderer. When I asked him why, he just smiled that tooth-bearing smile and said, "This pack works. No sense in finding a new one." The demand did not stop with him. It exploded outward. The galactic job boards lit up with a new, highly prized classification. Human crew member wanted. Shipping lines offered absurdly high signing bonuses. Exploration vessels advertised the danger and excitement of their missions, framing them as a challenge specifically for human applicants. Military contractors began recruiting from Earth's fledgling defense forces, valuing their strange blend of tactical discipline and chaotic ingenuity. Humans, the volatile, nascent species from a backwater death world, became the single most sought-after commodity in the galaxy. Not for their technology, which was still primitive, not for their strength, which was laughable compared to a glyptodon. They were sought after for their very nature, for their ability to see a problem not as a wall but as a thing to be hunted, for their refusal to accept failure, for their insane, paradoxical durability, for their coffee-fueled, relentless, stubborn refusal to just lie down and die. My species still views them with a measure of terrified awe. We build our ships to be perfect, logical, and flawless. But the universe is none of those things. The universe is chaotic and violent. And it turns out, in the cold, unforgiving dark of space, sometimes the most valuable thing you can have on your side is not a better engine or a stronger shield. It is a domesticated apex predator with a wrench, a bad attitude, and a deeply ingrained belief that anything can be fixed if you just hit it hard enough. The Vance anomaly was not an anomaly at all. It was an introduction. And the galaxy, I suspect, will never be the same. Our future relations are now an open question, not of master and servant or observer and observed, but of how the galaxy's myriad prey species will adapt to a new, dynamic partnership with the ultimate predator. And that, logically, is a terrifying and wondrous prospect.